All right, let's get real about PHP. For years, it's been the punching bag of the programming world. Yeah, I know, you've heard the jokes, you've seen the memes. But what if most of what people say about PHP is based on a version of the language that's been irrelevant for like over a decade? Today, we're going to cut through all that noise. This is the uncensored field guide to modern PHP. So first, let's just start with a reality check. A number that might blow your mind. PHP powers roughly 75% of the web. No, that is not a typo. 3 out of every 4 websites you visit are probably running on it. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's the engine behind massive platforms like WordPress, Wikipedia, and even the early days of Facebook.
Which, brings us to the big question. If it's so dominant, why is PHP is dead one of the most common things you hear in tech? The answer, well, it's complicated. And it starts with having to acknowledge its pretty messy past.
Okay, let's just dive into this head-on, starting with that first giant myth, that the language is some kind of relic. The truth is, PHP isn't dead, not even close. But it absolutely suffers from a massive reputation problem, and honestly, it's a problem it created for itself.
See, on one hand, you have the legacy nightmare. This is what everyone remembers. PHP started as a simple templating engine, not a full-on programming language. And this led to a super inconsistent standard library, and oh my god, it allowed for some truly terrible, insecure spaghetti code that still haunts parts of the web today. But on the other hand, you have the modern reality, and this is a completely different beast. Modern PHP is like the pragmatic, blue-collar worker of the web. The new versions are strictly typed, they are incredibly fast, and they have what's called a shared nothing architecture that makes scaling out almost ridiculously easy. This quote right here, it just reframes the entire conversation perfectly. The issue isn't about the language anymore, it's about the developer. The language has evolved so dramatically. I mean, professional PHP today looks more like Java or C# than those little script kiddie snippets from the past. So if your code hasn't changed in 10 years, you're the problem, not the language. So let's move to the next myth, which builds on this idea, that PHP development is somehow stuck in the past, with everyone using these clunky all-in-one packages like XAMPP that look nothing like a real production server.
In the modern world, let's be crystal clear. Everything starts with Composer. This is not optional. It is the absolute standard for managing your project's dependencies. All the libraries and packages your code relies on. But it does something else that's maybe even more important.
It provides an autoloader. And what that means is you never have to manually include files again. You just use a class, and Composer automatically finds and loads the correct file for you. This one simple change eliminates an entire category of common, super frustrating errors.
And the server setup? Completely changed. The old Apache mod PHP model is basically obsolete for any high-performance app. Today's professional stack uses Nginx as the web server, which then passes requests over to a process manager called PHP FPM. The key here is isolation. FPM keeps a pool of worker processes, so if one request causes a crash, it only takes down that one worker, not the entire server.
And here is a critical tool for safety. Because PHP is an interpreted language, a lot of errors don't show up until the code actually runs. Well, static analysis tools like PHPStand read your code without executing it and find type errors and other bugs that would otherwise crash your app in production. It is an absolutely essential safety net.
All right, let's tackle the biggest visual criticism, the idea that PHP code is just inherently ugly and messy. This is where the evolution of the language syntax itself becomes just so incredibly clear.
Just take a look at this. On the left is the old way of defining a class constructor. You declare the properties, then you assign them in the constructor. It's so much repetitive boilerplate code. Now look at the right. That's the modern way, using something called constructor property promotion. It does the exact same thing in a single, clean, totally readable line of code.
And this brilliantly illustrates another leap forward. The old switch statement was famous for being error-prone. It used loose comparisons that could lead to really unexpected bugs. The modern match expression is a strict, safe, and way more powerful alternative. It forces you to handle all the cases, and it returns a value directly, which makes your code far more robust.
And hey, if you've ever written any code in any language, you have seen this error. Well, modern PHP has these beautiful built-in operators to prevent it. The null coalescing operator provides a default value if something's null, and the null safe operator, it just stops execution if it encounters a null. No crash, no error, it's an absolute lifesaver.
This brings us to the final myth, that PHP is only good for simple, little scripts and just can't be used for large, complex, and maintainable applications. This is a myth that's rooted in those old procedural styles, and in the world of modern object-oriented design, it is completely false. So the most important rule for building large applications is this. You don't make your code depend on a specific implementation, like a MySQL database class. Instead, you make it depend on a contract, an interface. You're basically saying, I don't care what you are, as long as you promise you can do these things.
This is called dependency injection, and it's so much simpler than it sounds. Step 1, you define that contract, that database interface. Step 2, you require that interface in your class's constructor. And then step 3, you can inject any class you want that fulfills that contract, whether it's your real MySQL driver or maybe a fake mock database just for your tests.
So why does this matter? Because your application logic is now totally decoupled from your infrastructure. You can swap out your database, your caching engine, any external service without having to rewrite your core code. It makes your application flexible, and fundamentally, it makes it testable.
So, after busting all these myths, what does it actually mean to be a professional PHP developer today? It's not about just knowing the syntax anymore. It's about discipline, it's about tooling, and it's about architecture.
So here's the final takeaway. A modern developer. They type everything to catch errors early. They master Composer. They use dependency injection. They write automated tests. They follow community standards. They treat security as the baseline, not an afterthought. They understand performance, and they use modern tooling like Docker and CI pipelines. This is the non-negotiable checklist.
Look, the only thing holding PHP back is developers who refuse to learn how it works today. The tools are here, the language is robust, it's type-safe, and it's high performance. The patterns are established. The only question left is, what are you going to build with them? Go build something solid.